Hi everybody, my name is Christianson and I am the AEC coordinator at the Journey Museum and Learning Center in Rapid City, South Dakota. And today I'm going to be talking about the 1972 Black Hills flood. It's also known as the Rapid City flood, but what happened was on the night of June 9th, 1972, there was a horrific storm that caused flooding throughout the Black Hills area, and it took over 200 lives in a span of 12 hours. This disaster is one of the worst river floods in United States history. And so the Journey Museum and the Learning Center have been working on teaching people about the flood and remembering it, commemorating it. We are coming up on the 50th commemoration of the flood in 2022, and so the Journey Museum has been working on doing research involving the flood for a better understanding and better learning opportunities for our guests. This presentation we're going to be talking about today is actually one of two that's going to be put out for everybody to have. This first one talks about the timeline of events that happened during the night of the flood, the day of, and then the night of the flood. And then the second one will be talking about the aftermath and the legacy of the flood. So, to begin, we'll start with a photo. This photo is of the South Dakota National Guard coming over a bridge. And you can see the damage on the bridge and the fallen logs and all of this other stuff. But this photo kind of represents, I think it represents the flood. It talks about what happened, the disaster, the chaos, that's all encompassed in this photo. And it's something to keep in mind as we're talking, is that this flood disaster was horrific and ridiculous and immensely tragic. So, let's start on our timeline. Our timeline starts at 9 a.m. on the day of June 9th, 1972. There is a forecast center that states that the atmosphere is unstable enough for growing storm clouds to develop over the hills near Rapid City. And then at noon, the afternoon forecast from the National Weather Service calls for thunderstorms to develop over the Black Hills, with some storms becoming severe. And there are people who have been documented in saying that it was just overcast and cloudy all day long. So it's a very visible storm rolling in. At 3:40. Precipitation echoes are seen on the radar at Ellsworth Air Force Base and reported to the National Weather Service in Rapid City. They just kind of reflect the previous forecast that, hey, it's going to be stormy. And then at 6, rain began to fall at rates of 2 to 6 inches in an hour over the Black Hills. That's over a 12-hour period. And that was concentrated in the area between Pactola Reservoir and Rapid City. Now, the two images that you saw on these two past slides are from weather.gov, and they are just showing different weather maps of the Black Hills area on June 9th. We have to pause the timeline now because we do need to talk about cloud seeding. Cloud seeding comes up quite often, and a lot of people in 1972 kind of thought that cloud seeding was part of the reasoning that the flood occurred. The bottom line is cloud seeding did not cause the flood. And there were multiple investigations into the cloud seeding process that occurred. But the investigations came up with the same thing. And what those investigations came up with was that even if there had not been any cloud seeding done that day, the amount of water that fell over the Black Hills would have been the same. And these investigations can be looked at in the Journal of Weather Modification. The title of the article is Cloud Seeding and the Rapid City Flood of 1972 by Arnett Dennis. And it goes deeply into what the investigators found, what scientists discovered, all of that. So it's a very good place to get a general understanding of the cloud seeding and what happened after, if you're looking for that. But cloud seeding did not cause the flood. And then the picture we have on the screen here, that's an image from weather.gov. It's precipitation totals in inches at 3 sites hourly. 5 miles, one is 5 miles southwest of Sturgis, one is at Pactola Dam, and one is near Johnson Siding, 5 miles west of Rapid City. So, timeline of events continuing. The first warning of flash flooding came at 6 p.m. from Lawrence County. Sheriff McGrath was apprised of flooding on Boulder Creek, and he investigated, and then he notified state radio, who passed the information on to other police officers and the National Guard. At 6:30, 2 things happened. One, the Pennington County Civil Defense Director reported 3 inches of rain at Pactola Dam, and the other is that the School of Mines and Technology weather radar operator reported strong thunderstorms in the Hermosa area. An estimated 2 inches of rain per hour have fallen in Boulder Canyon. And then at 7:15, a flash flood warning was issued by the National Weather Service for the northern Black Hills area. The photo here is, that is the Pactola Lake picnic area. We have to pause the timeline again because the next couple of pieces of the timeline reflect upon leadership, and the leadership specifically that occurred during the flood is something I would like to discuss in a moment here. The photo you see on the screen, that's Colonel Corning. He was in charge of Ellsworth Air Force Base at the time of the flood. And it needs to be said that Rapid City and the Black Hills area would not have survived the way they did without Ellsworth Air Force Base and without the South Dakota National Guard being in the area at the time. Colonel LeMaster led the South Dakota National Guard at the time as well. Leaders, military, civilian, and volunteer, they communicated throughout the flood. The activation and use of the Emergency Operations Center occurred because of the collaboration between the Air Force, the National Guard, and the city of Rapid City. And the Emergency Operations Center, or the EOC, that was set up to allow for a centralized area for people to get directions from. And you know, specifically, Mayor Barnett, who was mayor of Rapid City at the time, he was 29 years old. He was very active during the night of the flood. He went above and beyond what could be argued a normal mayor should do in an event like this. He had the fire and police departments call in all the staff that they could, if they could get there, and he also drove around Rapid City to knock on doors and get people out of their homes. He attempted to help stave off the flooding by turning off water supplies near Canyon Lake. He turned over a lot of he turned over essentially his position to the Air Force and the National Guard. So he stepped back and allowed them to take control of the situation. And sometimes that's the best leadership, is that when someone steps back and allows someone else to take over. No one can properly identify everything that these leaders did during the flood, every action they had to tackle, every decision they had to make. No one can properly identify all of those. But what we can tell you, and what we do know, is that every action that they took and every decision they made was the right one. So going into the leadership, at 7:15, Colonel LeMaster from South Dakota National Guard, he reports initial floodwater hitting Rapid City. This was done during his briefing to the companies within the South Dakota National Guard in preparation for flood operations. He immediately activated the Emergency Operations Center in Rapid City and began recalling all troops in the area by radio and television. And then at 7:30, Don Barnett is notified of the flash flood warning, and the National Guard and local law enforcement are called to duty. So it was an immediate response. The flood water, flash flood warning, flood water hitting, and then recalling law enforcement and National Guard. The photo on the screen there, that is a photo of the Emergency Operations Center. So at 8 p.m., the River District Office advised that the National Weather Service office in Rapid City to expand the warning southward to include Rapid City, so expand the flash flood warning. And then it also, at 8 p.m., the expanded warning was then issued by the National Weather Service, and South Dakota National Guard has 800 guardsmen with vehicles ready to react to rescue missions on call. And then as well, on top of everything else that happened at 8 o'clock, a citizen in the Nemo area contacted the National Weather Service about Box Elder Creek being in the flooded areas, and evacuations in low-lying areas of Nemo had begun. And then the Pennington County Emergency Operations Center was officially up and running at that point. The photo there, again, is of the Emergency Operations Center. Different people from the different groups are discussing amongst themselves. So at 8:40, a radar observer at Ellsworth Air Force Base reports heavy precipitation over the central Black Hills. And then at 9 o'clock, water level at Canyon Lake Dam rises 12 feet in 3 hours. So that just shows how strong the rains were at the time. The photo you see is an aerial view of Canyon Lake Park. Alright, so then timelines are starting to move faster as the night goes on. At 9:30 p.m., Rapid City Fire Department calls in all off-duty firemen at the urging of Mayor Barnett. And then at 10:15, Rapid Creek overtops its banks. And at 10:30, in a television and radio broadcast, Mayor Don Barnett urged the evacuation of all low-lying residential areas. I should also mention the image you see there is debris built up against the bridge going over Rapid Creek. At 11:15, Rapid Creek flood level peaked at a stage of 15.77 feet, 7.69 feet higher than the previous flood of record. And sometime between the hour of 11 and 11:30, Canyon Lake Dam failed. At 11:47, 93% of the electrical load in Rapid City is out of service due to the flood. That image is an image of Rapid Creek bank erosion from after the flood. The 93% of the electrical load in Rapid City is out of service. It took them 6 days to get that back up and running. So from midnight to 1:30 in the morning, Rapid City Fire Department reports numerous structure fires in the city, and most were allowed to burn as they could not be safely reached to extinguish. Because of the flood, they couldn't reach these burning structures because of the flood waters. And then at 12:15, a flood crest moving at an estimated 50,000 cubic feet per second reached downtown Rapid City. That image is of cars moved by the flood, having floated and then settled in a different place. So then, during the night of the flood, of course, there are rescues occurring. Search and rescue is happening. People are trying to survive, holding on to trees, holding on to roofs of houses that are moving downstream. Horrific stories come out of the 1972 flood that nobody can even fathom collecting all of these stories that come out of the flood. And then at 5 a.m. on June 10th, Rapid Creek has returned to within the banks of the stream. And at 7 a.m., by that time, South Dakota National Guard had dispatched over 100 rescue missions. So the first responders that responded the night of the flood, when I say first responders, I'm talking about official men and women who, within their job description, is to protect and serve their community, protect and serve their nation, whatever it may be. These are not the only first responders of the flood. Of course, people went out of their way to save people that they don't know. Volunteers worked tirelessly during the night of the flood trying to save other people, and some people lost their lives, themselves because they were trying to save others. But the official first responders come from the South Dakota National Guard, the United States Air Force, the Rapid City Police Department, and the Rapid City Fire Department. While they're not the only first responders, it is in the sense that it is part of their job. These men performed rescue missions at the risk of their own lives, recovery operations, and many of them would end up working from 24 to 48 hour stretches straight. What's interesting about that photo is it was taken the morning of June 9th, 1972. It is the police department at the time. And you can see the gray sky behind the building. It kind of is an ominous warning of what was coming that day. Now, this timeline of events was only a very tiny part of what happened during the flood. Because what I am deeming as flood related is actually the day that the flood occurred all the way up until, you could continue all the way up until the end of 1972. Because after the flood occurred and this timeline occurred, there are very immediate responses to the 1972 flood that shaped the way Rapid City and the Black Hills area bounced back after. So this timeline of events, while very factual and full of information about what happened the night of the flood, this is a very small part of a much larger conversation. And so the second presentation that the Journey Museum and Learning Center will be putting together is on the legacy of the flood. And we hope that you will tune in for that one too. Thank you.